AskReddit by entire principle 5125. What's the most outrageous lie you've ever caught someone telling? I'm a close, personal friend of the manager and I'll have your job for this. Me, the manager. Well, that's interesting because I'm the manager and I've never met you before. I'm the owner's brother, and he said to just load all this into my car. He'll figure it all out after. To which I said, that's wild. The owner's my dad, and I've never seen you at the family reunions. My first grader lied about not flushing the toilet. I found a poop, so I went and reminded him that he needs to flush. He said it wasn't him. There's two people in the house. I didn't poop. It doesn't take much deduction. Ghost pooper. I once had a woman tell me that she had SIDS as a baby. I neglected to comment on how she looked good for someone dead for decades. I got better. The stupidest one was a girl in my high school, claiming she was related to Pocahontas, but she had only ever seen the Disney movie. The biggest one was my cousin finding out that his 4 children were actually his nephews. His brother and his wife had been having a 12-year affair, which surprised us all. Poor guy. Mom 24 hours late picking up her kid. I was at the playground on a swing and got struck by lightning. I'm totally fine now, so no worries. Crack is whack, kids. 24 hours late? When I was in the army and one of the lads said he'd slept with 1,000 women. I said I'd only slept with 7 girls and he went apeshit. I couldn't work it out. Then I did the math and worked out he must have slept with a different girl every day for the last 3 years. I then said he must be pretty shit as none of them ever came back. I was a pretty naive kid. Sex addiction might produce numbers of that magnitude. Just throwing it out there. My coworker said George Soros sank the Titanic for the insurance. I pointed out that he wasn't even born yet when it sank. She then said it must have been his father and it's the same thing. I initially read this as George Santos and thought to myself, well, at least the coworker is willing to match his audacity and flair in the bullshit department. My best friend faked having cancer. I know a girl that faked a brain tumor to try to keep a guy back in 2009 to 2010. She wore head wraps and bandages and everything, claimed it was terminal and she wanted to spend her final months with him. I see her every couple weeks picking up her kid from daycare right down the street. When I was at school, one of the kids said he went to a private party with the Spice Girls and they played Kiss Chase. Teacher said if he didn't stop lying he'd give him detention, but he refused to stop. That's the sort of allegation that's taken a lot more seriously nowadays. My dad is a narcissist who lied about outrageous things to impress people, anyone, like a cashier or the lifeguard. And he would explode with anger if anyone in my family pointed out his lies. Here's his 2 best ones. In college, he was ping pong champion of the world. And he owns an airline in Mexico. These were said in all seriousness. They were not jokes. He said both of these with our whole family present and no one was brave enough to say anything. More stories, please? Was your dad offered the leading role in Forrest Gump but turned it down because he was too busy running the Mexican airline? When I was a freshman in high school, there was another freshman that claimed he had a job as a police officer after school. So he was admitting to being an arc? A girl at my high school made up a disease she had. She had this patch on her arm that would change color. If it went black it meant something was really wrong and she would faint. Turns out it was a patch she pulled out of a mood ring and the fainting was all fake. That is frickin' genius. Living in a shared house back in 1997. My housemate told us his dad had taught him a martial art that only his dad and Bruce Lee knew as they invented it together. We asked him to demonstrate and he said he'd promised to never reveal it to anyone. Was his dad Chuck Norris? Had a fella who worked for me call in on a Monday morning. Said he couldn't make it in cause he had just totaled his car. Next day he rolls up to work in said car and told us they had fixed it last night. Was it a common car like one of those crappy dark grey generic Honda Accords? An Indian co-worker didn't show up for work one day and claimed an accident had knocked him and his car into Lake Washington in Seattle. He begged for us to not fire him since he was lazy and had already been given his final warning about getting to work late and leaving early. He turned up the next day, and the car was fine, so our boss fired him on the spot. Welp, it turned out that was a new Honda. As soon as he got out of the hospital from the accident, he went and bought a new generic Honda just like he had before. It was a new car. We had to rehire him and apologize. Some dude said he did the drywall on the International Space Station. That's out of this world. In a group I was in, they said they were an Alaskan dog sledder and showed a poor quality photo of the dogs, almost as if taken on a computer monitor. Took me less than 5 minutes to pick up the photo on Google. Why bother? My boss trying to tell me that the chemical that turns pea colors in a pool are real. When I hit him with proof from the pool supply story, he retorted that the people he knew that had it were rich and no one else could afford it. My ex had his old FWB drive 2 hours to us. She booked a hotel for them. He had my mom watch the kids and I was working until 3 AM. But he wasn't going to go. Still makes me laugh that he thought I would believe that. I once taught a student, 3rd grade, who could not read. Like not at all. The only truly illiterate student I ever had. He always pretended that he could read by making stuff up. Obviously I called in his parents because I wanted to work on that issue. And they were just sitting there telling me that at home he reads them books for 9th graders without issues. Reading is a common thing kids lie about though. Another student who was dyslexic always took the hardest books from our library and returned them after a week. Whenever I asked him about the content of the book, he flawlessly made up stuff. He was extremely good at lying. Not very surprising as his father is a highly charismatic leader of a free church. Shit apple doesn't fall far from the shit tree. Ever hear of the Mormon Church? I was duped for 46 years. My whole life was a lie. That's rough, buddy. Well, I caught myself telling. I think I was about 6yo, and had gotten into a bag of jelly beans around Easter. Sugar was fairly officially restricted. You can have one cookie but only one. So I was kind of revenge binging. Delicious dart. When confronted by my parents, I had jelly bean residue on my lips. And my breath probably smelled like jelly beans. Did you eat the jelly beans? No. I once saw a friend of mine badly beaten. When I asked him what happened, he told me he had a fatal injury while walking. Ok. He told me that at his old school, he taught his astronomy class because his teacher was useless and freaked out after seeing him use telekinesis to explode a whiteboard market. Sure you did, bud. I really want one of these people to be telling the truth one day. Like, one day you see him walking near a construction zone and an I-beam starts falling towards some workers. He just stops and stares at it and it inexplicably stops, scoots over a few feet and continues, landing harmlessly. He just continues walking and doesn't notice you. My ex was a chronic liar, so I heard plenty. But the worst was that he had a little brother who had been hit by a car and died. He was crying when he told me and everything. Let me believe it for like 2 years. I got suspicious when I went to his family's house and he specifically told me not to mention his brother, and that there were no pictures of him in the house because the memory was too painful. Eventually I confronted him about it and he broke down and admitted the brother wasn't real. What was his reason for making it up? One day I discovered my son's trashed bedroom. I asked him what happened in there. He said he didn't know and he didn't do it. He's an only child. I came home one day to a trashed bedroom and it turned out that someone broke into our house through my room.